I don't know. Like that's like
Logging
having the
in.
save button, right? Be the icon for a floppy disk. Um, Everyone,
Atomic, like,
as
where do
you
you
are
point?
chatting, do you all have the ability to select your chat to everyone instead of hosts and panelists? Because we're all seeing where you are. Hello, Yolanda from Michigan. But it looks like you may not see where you all are.
Yeah, yeah, you do need
Oh,
to.
mine only says hosts and participants.
Oh, it
And
does.
Joe is from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Gosh,
Okay.
Michigan in the house today.
I think there's a setting that I always forget to click. Oh, wait.
Yeah, I was able to change mine to everyone, and I've seen Katrina Kennedy from Sacramento next door is on. Hello to Sacramento. And Vince dialing in. Now that you've asked the question, it's like preoccupying my mind in the background because no one's ever asked that question, and I think we all considered that to be the normal thing, and now you've opened a can of worms logically.
Someone taught me once how to change this during the webinar.
All right,
And
training folks, who knows how to do this?
yeah, please,
That's the bonus of knowing of having training folks.
let's see.
Yolanda's here, Arturo's here,
Has to be the
Anthony.
organizer. Vince, are you the organizer or is Marina your organizer here?
I'm the organizer.
Okay. Thanks,
But
Liz, for that tip.
I'm not seeing.
Jan says find your advanced settings. Jan, if you know which set of advanced settings, because there's advanced settings for sharing and participants in chat, that would be fantastic too. I love kind of crowdsourcing the tech support here.
Hmm.
Got Ryan from Virginia Beach. Hello. Good to see you again.
So I can go to advanced settings in my. I'm so embarrassed, guys.
No
Um,
worries. You know what, Vince, I would limited amount of testing here because Chris from New Jersey says that the webinar default is host and panelist and that there's no way to change it on the fly. So
oh,
you
okay.
may
Well,
not
I have
find.
changed it in the. I have changed it in the past because I've made this flub before. We do this every month, but I won't. That's fine. So, folks, you can chat, and everyone you see on the screen will see your chat. And if it happens to be delightful, we'll share it with everybody else. How's that?
I love it. While you do that, Vince, David in New Jersey has some tips for you too. You can scroll up once we get talking.
All right. Hey, thanks. Thank you. Okay, so
David Kelly.
while I read those, let's do a round of introductions for those of you that may not know everybody here. So on my screen, I'm going to just say JR, Marcus, Nick, and Megan in that order. Um, a brief, fun, jovial introduction. How about from each of you?
I'll start. Hey everyone, I'm J.R. Birch. I'm the Director of Learning Experience Design at Intrepid by Vital Source. I didn't come prepared with anything fun or jovial though.
Marcus.
Hi, I'm Marcus. I run Endeavor Intelligence, and I'm the author of the Endeavor Report, so where I present use cases, client-led, no vendors, in the space of applied workforce solutions. And yes, looking forward to this conversation with so many esteemed panelists.
Nick.
Hey, I'm Nick Floro. I'm a co-founder at Sailworks, and I've got two kids. That's everything.
I love it. I love it. And hi, everybody. I'm Megan Torrance. I'm the founder and CEO at Torrance Learning. And we do a lot of different things. Today, very salient in my mind in the last hour has come XAPI again. But Agile support for learning teams, AI support for learning teams, and our center of gravity is around custom learning design and development of really amazing experiences. And I think my interesting fact is I am, as usual, very well caffeinated. So I appreciated the on-ramp time to be able
Well,
to do that
didn't
today.
you sneak away just 2 minutes ago to get more caffeine? So, okay. All right, there we go. Well, hey, I'd like to thank all four of you for spending time. I know it's like getting to be the end of the year, which is crazy, and we're all so busy. So thank you so much for joining. Let's jump in to this panel. So I've got a question that I'll just, chime in if you'd like to answer first. So looking back at the year, is there an AI-driven project that you've been a part of, that you've seen, that just was really successful, that really worked? Anyone have an idea and then they can share with us?
I'll suggest one. You could download Marcus's report since it has a lot of fantastic learnings from there. And while he picks which one of those is his favorite children, um, I'm right now, Vince, working on a great big project. It's an extension of work that we've been doing for a few years, and we were talking about the DevLearn Demo Fest in the green room beforehand. And a precursor of that project is something that we're now building out for what will be a huge, huge scale um, uh, project. And it's not released yet. It's still in its development and testing. And what's exciting about it, though, is the level of attention that it's getting from senior executives. And at the same time, it's nudging me to remember that senior executives don't always have the best AI literacy to be able to make decisions. So you can't come and say, but first we have this conversation, we're going to have an AI literacy course. So it's embedded in that process of getting buy-in and navigating their rightfully very rigorous governance procedures. So it's super, super fun. And this time next year, we will have like a true A/B test on the effectiveness of that solution. So I'm actually really excited about that. So maybe you'll invite me back.
Yeah, that's great. How can you describe how much of the project is AI driven and what the role of AI is in the project?
Yeah, so in this project, we have people who are training for a role that's very interpersonal. So they have to interview somebody else and follow a certain protocol for doing that interview. It's a face-to-face, human-to-human interview. And yet these people are being trained completely asynchronously or almost completely asynchronously in a very distributed fashion. So we wanted to have the ability to have them practice that interview and get feedback from an authoritative source on how they did. And so what we're doing is we have the learner is presented with the first part of a conversation, and then they need to speak into their phone what they would say next. And then they get feedback from an AI coach based on the protocol for that part of the interview and what they actually did. And and then they go on to the next one. It is not a full chat because a fully free chat can go off into all sorts of different places. And we're really, really honing it, making it very, very specific. And I call it's on a very short leash. But we'll have the ability to randomly assign people as they start this learning experience into an AI coach version, or is simply you speak your answer, you get the same case, you speak your answer, but instead you get what we've always done in e-learning, everybody, which is here's what the correct answer is. The expert would say this, how did you do, right? And then you keep going. So we'll actually be able to measure people's perceptions, their scores on their kind of exit ticket test, their job retention, their quality of work, and the volume of work, their productivity. And so we are super excited about that. But the results will be, another 9, 10 months before we're ready.
Oh, that's great. That sounds like a big project. Thanks, Megan. So Scott Weersing asked, what is an AI project? So I'm referring to any learning project that we're producing or developing that has any element of generative AI or even machine learning as some or all of the project is how I'm defining it. Anyone else want to chime in with a highlight project that they want to share with the group?
I'll share one. Uh, just for Intrepid, we've released we call it an AI activity, and it's one of the features that really changes the way that our clients can enable learning in the platform because it gives them something they've never really had before, and it's the ability to build their own AI-powered learning experience. And it's tailored exactly to their business, their skills, their audience, the context that they care about, not kind of this generic scenarios, but something very specific to them. So what makes it work is it's not this one size fits all tool. It's this flexible foundation. We give them the foundation to build whatever they need and fit it anywhere inside their learning journey. So we've seen clients build anywhere from risk role play scenarios that are very specific to their business or to their clients. They've built AI agents that live inside their class and can answer questions just like as a SME would. They've built coaches that give targeted feedback whenever they submit a project, or even have the learners themselves give their own scenario and let the AI practice in a way that's very hyper personalized to each individual learner. And it's been a success because we didn't ask clients to adopt our version of AI. It's giving them the freedom within some guardrails to build exactly what they need. And it's something that people haven't really been able to get to that level of personalization and even what I've been calling hyper personalization to each individual could put in their own scenario and practice that. Been very cool to see the creativity, the way clients are kind of taking advantage of the new tools.
Great. Thanks, JR.
Amazing.
Nick, did I see you about to say something?
Yeah, but two quick examples. One on the content side, seems some really fun things where we had a client that had a little over 500 hours of video-based content that spanned the last dozen years. And rather than having to touch or update that, we were able to use AI to go in and tag the content, write a summary, and even create updated transcripts to put inside the system to help their team, which is small, manage to maintain that. But that took, weeks of work and, reduced it to a couple hours, which is, just a simple way that you could take advantage of it. And then on the fun side, we have a platform that we're working with another group that allows a learner based on where they are inside of a system to either assess their knowledge of what is on the page, coach them on the learning components, or just turn off because they're getting an assessment. But that was kind of a fun thing that we hadn't done yet, just to kind of see it, turning on or off based on what you were doing inside the platform. Interesting.
That's great. Thanks, Nick.
Yeah, for me, I'd have to say it's very difficult to choose a favorite. When you're writing a report with many use cases, you don't just pick a favorite and throw it out there. And especially not the week before you're going to publish the new report with lots of new and exciting use cases, and you don't want to give away who's in that. The one thing I would say, though, is that this year I've seen a lot of fantastic solutions. And the reason I'm saying fantastic is because I'm starting to see many solutions that do 2 out of 3 things already well, dipping their toe into the third. So the one is learning/training. That is, of course, at the center of everything. A solution that supports learning and training and practice is key. Then the second would be real-time performance support, a solution that can also at the same time give us real-time performance support, push and pull. Nudge and I'm now going in because I want to ask something would be the second piece. That's often where direct LLM plugins fail a little bit because they only like to be pushed from the user point of view. They're not very good at nudging you and following a specific script path in nudging you. And then the third one is the data piece. We all love a bit of data, and we want to measure how good people are, what they're currently requiring, how they have developed in recent months and weeks, and what they will require next in order to continue to improve them. Because in learning and development, we're looking to have a continuous improvement loop, of course. And if you throw all three at me, I would say that's a silver bullet. That's not a proper solution right now. I've seen solutions that do 1.8, 1.5, 1.8 really well, and then maybe dip their toe with 10, 15% into the third pillar. If I'm critical, but that is exciting because that is realistically where we are currently and how we're developing solutions that can finally help with real-time support, help the general learning and training and upskilling process, as well as deliver us the data to keep this continuous loop going. And so very exciting to finally see that this year. And as we all started the pre-chat, and as many of us have just come out of DevLearn, to see at DemoFest that the solutions have made a huge leap in that direction on average
Yeah.
compared to last year. I was one of those who's always been a big fan of DemoFest, but on average was a little bit disappointed the last 2 years. There were always standout solutions in there, and those that have produced them know what I thought of them because I went and high-fived those people. But on average, we've had a big leap this year, also visibly at DemoFest. Those would be my 2 cents worth. But yeah, my new
That's
report
great.
is going to be out next week, so keep an eye.
Awesome. Thank you. I want to follow up on the data piece, but a couple of housekeeping first. I figured out the chat, everybody. So if you can make sure you're chatting to everyone and just not the hosts and panelists. I'm very proud of myself for figuring that out. Well, Jan figured it out for me. Thank you, Jan. And then Daniel, I do see your question. I'm going to wait on your question in a little bit because we've got a prompt later for the panel where that question will make a lot more sense timing wise. So I do see you, Daniel. And that Daniel did use our Q&A feature. Please use that if you've got a question you really want me to see. I'm doing my best to look through the chat as well. So, Marcus, you talked about your third point, the data. What I find is interesting is that we've been data driven for so long, but the use of generative AI creates new data elements, doesn't it? Like, what can we track? And what do we want to track? Megan, can I pick on you on this? Just, we've got this, you're the data element queen here. How has generative AI changed your approach to collecting data, if at all?
That's one of those where it shouldn't and it changes everything all at the same time, right? Because what I'm keenly interested in, and I'm a student of Will Thalheimer's learning transfer evaluation model, and like many things that we're finding, there's fancy new technology that I adore, and then there's learning science and what works and practice. And I'm finding that many of the same things work to keep tracking, right? And to be still looking. We now have new capabilities for analyzing that data, both at scale and at depth that many of us in learning design haven't necessarily been able to do in the past. We're not always, as an industry, yet well suited with the data literacy to be able to read those results. But it does allow us to process a lot more data a lot more quickly. And so that's pretty interesting to me. I think there's also some, I've always been really interested in tracking what the learning experience results in, right? What's happening in the on-the-job experience, and that may or may not be something that we're tracking with AI. What I will say though, one of the spaces that I find really, really important is tracking back what is happening in the learning experience and in the AI interaction if it is a free form. And we have a solution for one of our clients where we are tracking back all of the learners' responses and the AI responses and storing it separately using XAPI so we can audit it later and keep track on things. And so that's something that's really interesting to me.
Yeah. We get asked a lot about data analysis in the work that we do at Mobile Coach. And what I find really challenging and interesting is that if you're in a pure generative AI conversation, for example, you're not going to have the same, you're not going to have the same learning path for ever. It's going to be unique to each learner. And because it's this dynamic between a guided conversation, which maybe an instructional designer has teed up and created a framework for. Hey, we're going to talk about, how to start a conversation, a difficult conversation. So maybe you create a little bit of framework so from a data perspective, okay, this interaction is going to be about how to start a difficult conversation. But then you're blending that in with a self-guided experience where the user can say, well, I had this scenario, or what about this, or what about that? No two users are going to be the same. So how much of that do you want to track? Do you need to track? Those are some of the things that we're sort of grappling with. And then how do you present that data too is very, very, it's fun to think about.
And
One of the things that I I guess worry about is that we'll have all this new data and new insights into what people are doing, but we still will default back to things like completions as the thing that we've been doing forever because it's there and it's so easy. It just doesn't tell us anything.
Yeah.
But now you have these insights of like quality of practice, like seeing what people are they actually applying what you're teaching them in the moment. You can see things like the transcripts and get, analysis from that. Like ours will show you, here's how you did on your first try. Here's your scores on your second try in whatever categories you're measuring, and you can see improvement. Hey, by the third practice, people improved their empathy skills by 40%. Those are quality metrics that you can then use to share with stakeholders and say that look at the impact that we're having. Um, so I say that just to make sure that we don't just default back to what's common that we've always done, because there's so much more insight that we'll be able to get now.
That's a great insight, JR. This sounds like a topic that could be its own webinar. I'm going to move things along. Um, so if anyone wants us to go back to this topic, just chime in the chat and I'll try hard not to ignore it. So, hey, this is to me, it's been like the continued year of the pilots. Last year, lots of pilots. This year, tons of pilots. I think for obvious reasons. Um, what separates successful pilots from ones that are less successful? Any like words of wisdom there from this group?
Generally, the difference is the change management and transformation piece. All the use cases I speak to, every single client talks about the challenges they had to overcome to get usage to the right place. And every use case I'm allowed to share, and also the use cases that people share with me that I can't put in the Endeavor report because the organization is not willing to sign something off. All of them have that in common. So that change management and transformation piece is absolutely critical to the entire process and is often not given the importance that it should have. The second piece is the longer term thinking. It is very easy to sign off a pilot, especially when it's low cost and low risk, and to applaud the signing off of the pilot and to get it kicked off, and not to have thought about what will we learn, how will we grow from here, and what would the next steps potentially look like, and what are paths A, B, and C that we might head into, and what other benefits might we gather from this. That's often not thought through enough. It's more about getting the tech in, getting it in front of people, and celebrating that now people have access. And the real surprise there for me is still, and I've seen a lot of use cases, is still that a use case that I say is a no-brainer 11 out of 10 win-win. Even I'm still surprised when I have such a conversation and I think you've got a winner. And then as we dig deeper into the use, we realize that in the first 4 weeks, people went in once and hated it and never logged in again. Into use cases where you think they were so clear cut, this can never fail. And even I'm surprised time and time again that I overestimated the simplicity, although I'm very aware of the challenges. So those are the things that I would say make a good pilot, and also are the challenges that you need to overcome.
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. I might just provide a counter thought to your beginning point where I have seen organizations where actually putting together a pilot is very difficult, not easy because of getting organizational approvals, getting through privacy and security. So, hey, I've seen organizations say, hey, we just want to run a very simple pilot for just 20 people, but then IT and security will say it's the same rigor as if you're going out to 20,000 people. And that has been surprising for some people. Put in the chat if that describes your organization. I'm just curious if that does. And Liz, I'm hoping that we're answering your question to hear about pilots, about what do you think makes a successful AI experiment. Anyone else want to highlight any pilot
IT is
updates?
always a big one, but then now there's also, I found that legal gets into it much more now, along with IT, of what are your AI guardrails, and we want to see all of your AI guardrails and run that through legal. So that's another hurdle on top of the IT that's relatively new.
And yet, it's very easy for all of us, me included, right, to say, oh, IT and legal, they're getting in my way. They're actually serving a very valuable organizational function in like there's often a reason, right? When I hear about this, people say, yeah, I work at a bank and we're not allowed to do anything. I'm like, I put my money in banks. I'm pretty cool with this. So, I think there's certain organizations are dealing with lower risk information or have the ability to parse off that lower risk information in order to pilot that not everybody does. So, I want to make sure it doesn't sound like we're bashing people who aren't moving that fast, right?
Yeah,
Often they have a
yeah,
really good reason.
For
yeah,
sure.
and just new things that they haven't looked at before that need the scrutiny. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it means that, that all of us need to bridge any sort of AI literacy gap that we have when it comes to infrastructure stuff, so we can be good collaborators with those people, our colleagues in IT, because we're all on the same team. And so I do think that when AI literacy is a little more suspect, then we can get nervous and maybe not be as effective in having those conversations collaboratively. Any other last thoughts about pilots that you've seen? Is it just me, or have you all also seen lots and lots of pilots this year?
Oh, lots and lots of pilots and lots of energy around that. I just want to actually underscore Scott Weersing's comment around having a control group for your pilot. If we're not designing, I mean, just L&D in general or organizations, if we're not designing a good experiment, we may not be giving a pilot a valid test. And a control group, I mean, think about how we test drugs and therapeutic interventions and things like that. And that's that scientific methodology thinking about how we approach something like that is helps us bring rigor. A lot of times, from my data and analytics side of my head, people talk about, I want data so I can prove my value or prove my project worked, as opposed to, I want data in order to evaluate if my project worked and where it did and how to improve it. And so that distinction and that mindset, I think, is essential for all of us here.
No, that's great. Thanks. Hey, Nick, can I ask you, how much is your team, or you can generally describe, using AI for content generation? Just curious, like, can you give us a little
Yeah,
color
we're using it all the time now. I would say 20 to 40% of our time is playing with AI in production side. One interesting thing that tied into this question was we've had organizations now say that if we're using AI to generate copy or feedback or audio or video, they're like, that's a violation of their rules. Even though that all we're doing is delivering a piece of content, they're like, well, that could endanger us. I'm like, it's not like the AI can affect their system or, it's a piece of content. So there's like that's been mind-boggling to me. Like we're trying to have discussions and trying to understand why IT would say that the AI is going to infect them. Like it's just an audio file or video file. How is it going to affect anything? But on the development side or content, like the programmers are now using it to test, or especially when we have like lower level, junior level, like starting out in the field or starting out trying to figure stuff out. They're going there rather than Reddit or Googling things to find pieces of examples to get some code, and then the senior team will go through it with them to help them shape it or make it better. My favorite example is I'm asking the designers now to ask, as a senior designer or a lead at this company, give me feedback on how this matches the brand. Or as an engineer with 30 years experience, how would I rip apart this design? But it's been uh, awakening, like just to see how it's working well or not, and just kind of factoring that in, so that rather than me ripping apart all the designs, the team has expanded and they're prepping ahead of time.
Yeah, so that's I would thank you for sharing that. I imagine that's going to resonate with lots of people in terms of like percentage and how we're using AI. I have a question though about, like, this will be an oversimplification to everybody, so hopefully that you'll forgive me if it's too simplified, but like I think about a traditional e-learning environment where it's highly structured. Here's slide one, here are the things to read or to watch, and then click next, and here's slide two. And I can see here's the oversimplification part where maybe there's some ways to use generative AI to decide what's going to be on that slide. But I wonder from a learner journey perspective, has AI affected the way you think about the high level learner journey? Like, does it have to be slide one to slide two? Has that crept in at all into any of your learning journey designs? I see Marcus and Megan nodding your heads. Marcus, can we start with you? Or your
I mean,
observation?
truly adaptive learning is here, but you have to have enough content to do it. And the fall down of adaptive learning has always been, if you've shown the first explanation of a situation, then you ask the first practice question and get it wrong. You show your second explanation. Now you're praying that they get the next question right. Because if they get it wrong the second time, you have to have a third explanation ready. And if you don't, you're not doing adaptive learning. You're now looping through the same two explanations, and you're going to really annoy the learner. So the overpromise of adaptive learning was never about how adaptive can it be. The overpromise and the hype around it has been how easy it is to generate all the content you would require to do so. And one of the organizations I have in the last Endeavour report, which I am going to mention now, is the Chartered Accountants Ireland, who have an adaptive learning piece that is absolutely fantastic. But they've been around for 100 years and they have more practice questions and explanations than you could ever make up. So they have enough material that if they give you an adaptive learning program, no student can ever, in a reasonable amount of time, have seen every question, have seen every explanation. And then you're in a fantastic world of being able to offer a very personalized journey where you can see some questions first, as you would with a personal tutor. If a personal tutor meets you for the first time, the first thing they're going to do is ask you 3 questions, and then they can already gauge whereabouts you are at. So you can start that journey with questions. You can develop in chapters, in modules on your own, and if you have pre-existing knowledge, it'll immediately recognize that. That is here, but you need the content. And the beauty about this organization is they had all these oodles of content, and that's why they were able to make so much of it. Going forward, as you've already mentioned, generative AI might create the next slide on the fly. That is something where we are starting to see the first beta versions that can build on the fly. The slight concern with that is, and those who know me know, I'm not the silver bullet person who says AI will automate everything. Just build a training program automatically. I don't like those demos on the exhibition floor. We need to watch out that when it comes to good learning design, when it comes to evidence-informed practices, we don't fall into the overpromise of how successful and how fully automated it is. So realistically, personalization can be achieved if you have enough content, and ideally the content is in line with evidence-informed practices and research around effectiveness and how to learn best. We are making big strides, but as with everything in life, when you make big strides, you're nowhere near the finish line yet. And this is an ongoing thing.
Thanks, Marcus. Megan, did you want to weigh in on this?
Plus one to everything Marcus said. I think the other thing that's a useful mind shift for us is that in our industry, we tend to have learning here and performance support here. And we now are much more able to blur that line because part of performance support is to help my continued learning. And with push and pull chatbots, I have the ability to, or coaches or conversational bots, right? I have the ability to extend that experience, but also have it remember what I was doing in my learning experience. So having that that handover and that continuity is really important. I even would say, right, so Nancy, right, so putting learning in the flow of work, I like to put working in the flow of learning too, right? So how do I make sure that both are happening to ensure a really, really holistic experience?
So I've got 2 follow-up questions. I'm trying to weave in some of the questions that people have been leaving with this topic. The first is, let's talk about this is Daniel Green's question about measuring AI proficiency within your teams. So we've talked about using AI. Nick, you referred to some junior, maybe less experienced people and having them mentored by senior folks. How are you dealing with AI proficiency within your teams? JR, can we hear from you? How is
Yeah.
Trevor dealing with that?
Actually, we're running a course, a program internally uh, for exactly that. And the very first piece of that is we're trying to get everybody on the same page with AI knowledge and efficiency. But to do that, we first have to know where everybody is. So we start off with a very simple survey, just asking. I think it was like 8 questions, like how often do you use it? What do you use it for? How comfortable with you are or are you with it? Those types of things, just to give us a baseline of where are people. So we know, in our company, I think it was like 60% rated themselves as either confident or very confident in AI. And there's like a smaller portion, 20%, I think, that were not confident. So that now as we go forward, we kind of know where people are and we can start to develop materials that accommodate where people are. And one of the things is bringing in the people that are confident and that have a lot of experience with it, bringing in those people to share examples, show what they're doing. We do these lunch and learns for people to actually see, here's what this part of the business is using AI for. And the next month we'll do a different part of the business just to showcase what people are doing, not just how to do it, but also what are we using it for? How is it improving the business? How is it improving the way we work? So we've been running that for about 3 months now. And we're on kind of on phase 2 of just now we know where people are, so starting to deliver content that people are asking for. I think that's the biggest thing we miss is you don't ask people what is it that you need? Where are you and what do you need? And we start there and hope the goal is to get people to a level of proficiency much faster than just playing the guessing game and throwing out content and say, here's LinkedIn Learning, go find what you need.
Yeah, it seems to me that I mean, how seasoned does a designer have to be able to not only understand, it seems like understanding what generative AI can do for content production is just sort of par for the course, but understanding the dynamics of how it impacts the learner journey, understanding what a customer or an organization might want for data analytics with a sort of a generative driven user experience. Um, uh, what, how seasoned does one have to be to design a really great AI driven learner experience?
At least for me, in the context of Intrepid, when we built our AI activity, the idea was that we have a lot of our clients, they're not learning professionals. They're program managers that they manage the learning program, but they don't really have the background of L&D. So how can we build something that would allow them to create an effective AI activity, but without having to be an expert? So one of the things that we've done is like we kind of released it in 2 phases. One was just a phase where we could have people write their own instructions for an activity and we could start to understand and learn what clients are using it for and what do they want to get out of an AI activity, what kind of scenarios do they want to use. That helps us take that knowledge and it helps us build this phase 2 that we release, which is basically an AI activity wizard, where you just tell us, here's the goal of this activity, here's the tone that the AI should have, here's the metrics that we want to evaluate. And it kind of goes to this wizard, answer the questions. We write the instructions for you. Just having AI write the instructions based on what we told you. You can upload your own supporting documents or link it to materials in the class. So we're trying to take this thing that was once you did have to have prompting and know how to, get something out of AI and turn that into a wizard where anybody can do it. And so far, we've had pretty good success with it. It's taking something that was out of reach for a lot of people, and now making it within like 5 clicks.
That's great. That's great that you're supporting your team in that way. This kind of dovetails into like also, how experienced or how seasoned does a designer have to be to really create a great learning experience? It dovetails into this question of what's the human's role in working with AI? And there's lots of frameworks out there that folks are. I think there's a lot of great frameworks out there that people are sharing around that topic. So, hey, I want to pause and answer some of these questions that have been hanging out in our Q&A. DJ, hey, DJ, nice to see you on here. DJ asks, any tips or tools you can suggest for connecting disparate data sources to provide a more cohesive learner data snapshot? I have seen, I'll chime in on this one.
No.
Well, there are your traditional like Power BI, reporting dashboards that I've seen organizations use. So either a Power BI or something akin to that. That's very sort of API friendly, where you can bring in data, different data sources. And so wherever your generative learning experience is, hopefully that learning platform or learning experience platform or whatever, wherever that's housing that learner experience can give you some interoperability with the data. I have found that there needs to be some data formatting and massaging to make sense of that in a Power BI. So I do think that this question that we had about a half an hour ago around data elements, it's still really early in the game. There's not like a standard of, hey, here's this 10-minute AI driven chat. What are the data elements that we want, and how do we standardize that? And how do we make sense of that in a visual format? I think it's still pretty early, and so there's some massaging that you can do with that data to put it into a one sort of data snapshot, data dashboard to rule them all type of format.
Think
Anyone
what
else
we
have?
have here, right? So X8, right? So if you think about just a grossly oversimplified look at data in the L&D space, right? We had SCORM, which is super shallow and limited and regular, and we knew exactly what to expect from every single e-learning course and every single LMS. And we couldn't do a lot with it. And we thought that was all we had. So that's where we get all excited about completions, right? And I'm not going to throw out completions, nor am I going to throw out LMSs, which I know are the super fancy things to do these days. I still think they're valuable. We get an XAPI environment, and now we get to play with all the tools who never lived in an LMS and all the kinds of data that never lived in an LMS because it didn't fit that SCORM model and that e-learning model. And then we have the problem of how do I manage all that data? How do I get all that data in, right? So learning record stores do a great job of that, but often are seen by organizations as yet another, right, piece of learning software I have to get, and it wasn't fancy. And it was very hard to make that business case. AI is doing the same thing that XAPI did, in that now we have even more places where we can be learning and even more types of data and even less structured around that data, and it's all over the space. And yet I think some of the hard work still needs to be done by us individually and as an industry in figuring out what the data is, figuring out how are we going to measure, figuring out ideally industry standard, but gosh darn, that's awfully hard. Ways of defining these metrics and managing this data and getting it all in. And one of the things that I love about the LRS teams is that they are all building connectors. So you don't have to send XAPI. You can send anything to them, right? They will transform it on the way in. And then that enables you to have a single place where you can manage your data, even if you can't get access to or use some of the other tools that the rest of your organization has.
Yeah. So Megan, Thomas asks, just because we can get more data from AI, should we? Is there value? How would you respond to that?
Well, I think there's a variety of things, right? I now have more data so I can explore differently, right? But I also have the ability to start at the top, right? In a perfect world, in an Ivy Tower world, we start at the top. What are our goals for this program? What are our goals for this people? What are our goals for this business process? How do we measure those and then start tracking that work? Okay. All of this, I think there's multiple layers here, right? Because the question is, just because we can, should we? And that answer depends on, what does it cost? Can we adequately protect it? Right? Now that we have more data, we have more responsibility around data protection. And do we know what to do with it when we have it?
Yeah, great comments. Anyone else want to weigh in on this data collection,
Just
Marcus?
as an example to Megan's comment there, in one of my classes, using all of that data that we have in the class, I can ask questions with our kind of with our built-in AI that I never could before. So for example, we have an introduce yourself activity that's kind of at the very beginning of the class, like the second thing that you do. And one of the questions that somebody asked was, does the introduce yourself activity, does it increase engagement? I had in order for me to find that through the data manually, it'd take me forever and I would never do it. But in a matter of 2 minutes, I can ask a question and say, hey, compare the engagement between the people that have completed the introduce yourself activity and the people that haven't. And within 2 minutes, I found that if you complete the introduce yourself activity right up front, you you complete 2 to 4 times more content than the people that don't complete the introduce yourself activity. So one of the things that taught me, one of the things we used to do was put that introduce yourself activity kind of lower in the like that first page of content. We'd put it a little lower. That tells me right off the bat, move that sucker up top. Make that the first thing to do. Build that connection right up front. Those are the types of things that I probably wouldn't have seen, but because I have access to all this data and I can ask in just a natural language, I can make so much more data-driven, more important data-driven decisions that really make a difference.
That's a great example. Thanks, JR, for sharing that. Marcus, were you going to add something?
Just a really short one. The biggest opportunity here in real-time performance is that through the modality of interacting with the tool, we can measure implicitly a skill depending on which skill it is. The easiest skill to measure is someone's level of English. If you're in an English class and you're talking to a chatbot, ideally a voice chatbot in English, then we know after 20 sentences what your level is, what range of vocabulary you've used, and what grammatical mistakes you've made. We're measuring the actual skill. And then we can also utilize second and third layer implicit measuring. For example, if you're asking a question about pivot tables, we probably know relatively quickly, at least if you understand pivot tables, what level you're asking at in how you formulated the question, and where you're stuck. And so there are implicit ways of measuring someone's understanding through the interaction with a real-time performance support. And then lastly, the one we've used very often in the past, that doesn't go away yet, is the one where we ask, how would you solve this problem if you were to solve it? And then they talk us through it, which is kind of a measurement, but we have to take it with a pinch of salt because explaining how you would do it is not the same as doing it. But all of these are adding a really cool layer on top of what we could measure in a learning program and in a real-time support program. The critical question here then remains one that is more ethical, which is how much are we measuring and how much are we listening in on every single conversation. I think in the chat earlier, was it John Turner who brought this up, is that we also need to think about how many interactions are we actually monitoring and what data are we pulling from it. That question has to be asked openly. So that's an ethical challenge for this potentially huge influx of data we have to think about and possibly deal with in our function going forward, but also some ethical challenges as to the big brother observatories that we are kind of also building at the same
Yeah,
time.
and we also have different privacy regulations depending on where our people are around the world. Hey, I'm going to pivot to a sort of a big chunky topic that I want to make sure we have enough time for. And that is, what are the biggest implementation challenges in these types of projects? Because I think that having a discussion about that could be very useful for everybody here. So what are sort of the biggest implementation challenges you've experienced or you've seen that you can, and then maybe not how do you approach overcoming them?
For me, trust is the biggest implementation challenge. It's helping SMEs, stakeholders, legal, IT, those types of things, but mostly just the SMEs and the designers to trust the AI because everybody's worried it's going to go off into left field. The conversation will take off in this direction. It'll drift from the framework or misrepresent things. But the way we've solved that is just by building transparency into the process. So, like I mentioned, sharing here's our static prompts for everything that the AI does. Here's what we're looking at in the background. We've had some clients review it and ask for us to make tweaks to it. Perfectly fine. We can add that into it. We've created kind of these structured specs. We've created all kinds of these working real examples based on clients that, scenarios they've given us. We've built the examples so they can see them, they can play in them. We've asked them to break them, go in there and try to, take this leadership role play example and just randomly ask it how long do I need to put a chocolate cake in the oven for? See if it goes off track or see if it keeps you in line. So these types of things, once they see that the structure is in place, that the guardrails are there, and they can trust it, it's been a real big help for us.
That's a great insight. Thanks, JR. Anyone else want to bring up a challenge, implementation challenge?
We had two organizations going through all the approval processes. Everything was greenlit, built everything, and nothing to do with us or the project, but the departments made a change to their policy and everything went on hold. And it was hard to start up conversations again to understand, what the reasoning was or what can we do to discuss and help them get back on track. But they didn't allow it to go forward. It's just frustrating. You guys are all my therapy today. Thank you.
We're here for you, Nick. We're here
Yeah,
for you.
thank you. Uh, but especially when there's no logic, like they had a policy, then all of a sudden, I think that, the point was that the policies are evolving and changing just like AI is, and it's just like, how do we check in or make sure that we're still go? We're going to launch next week or next month or next year, or how do we build that into our processes to make
Right.
sure? Yeah.
Yeah. Dynamic environment for sure. Anyone else want to chime in on implementation challenges?
I think
Bring the doubters to the table is how I would describe the challenge and the solution. If you can't justify that this is fine in terms of data privacy, you haven't done your homework. Don't blame it on the IT or the legal person saying they're stopping us implementing this. And I don't know many people who've done this actually, right? So I'm just paraphrasing here, slightly tongue in cheek. If someone says we're not happy with the data security piece, research it and find out. And if the research leads to you deciding that you can't go ahead with this pilot, hallelujah, thank God you've done the research and you've done your homework. And that's how you bring people along for the ride, and that's how you build the trust that JR was talking about. So I would say we need to just zoom out once in a while and see the bigger picture rather than wanting to deploy the tech solution. And if we have thought about the people transformation, and if we have brought the doubters to the table, we can have exactly the conversations that we need to be having and should be having, because your doubters make you do your homework. That's the innovators will want to run ahead. The doubters make the innovators do the homework. If you have both in the room, you've got a perfect team.
Yeah, and I think as we do this, we want to be looking at it's easy to bash our leaders for making bad decisions or too fast decisions or whatever. They've got a lot on their plate and things are changing really fast. People who are bringing them AI solutions have the ability to deeply soak in these new solutions and be up to date all the time. Business leaders are being challenged to do exactly that, but also run their businesses. Right? There's a lot going on. And so I'm finding, both right what we're talking about, we need to build trust and make sure people are comfortable with solutions. We also need to maybe sometime temper all the excitement around like, oh, I want it to do everything and I'm just going to fire all the people and AI will run the business and it will be amazing, right? And there's a space in between where truth exists, or today's truth exists. And how do we help our leaders confidently navigate that and feel like they have the ability to be authentic and vulnerable about what they don't know in order to make a decision.
Yeah, that's great. I'd like to bring up an implementation challenge that I see quite frequently, and that is it's difficult to know how much things should cost because it's changing, it's dynamic. There's not like a baseline. And organizations, large organizations particularly, don't like variable costs because they've got set budgets. And the way that a lot of generative AI tools are priced it's a variable cost. And so, how much is this going to cost? I think is a real implementation challenge. And I think some of the remediation for that we've talked about transparency. It's building that trust, but it also requires having, yeah, and that's what's driving a lot of pilots too. Like, okay, we want to try this. We get the value proposition, but we actually don't know how much this is going to cost. Or are 1,000 of our learners going to use this, or are 15,000 of our learners going to use this? And if there's a variable cost involved, that's a big difference. So I think there's still a lot of figuring out that needs to be done as this is true with any new and emerging technology. It's just figuring out how much things are going to cost.
And I
Uh,
think what's also interesting, Vince, in that, right? So it's the variable cost, and it's not only how many users, which we're all pretty used to in an LMS and a tool environment in which you pay per head, but how much they use it,
yep.
right? And I think to Daniel's point, the more successful a pilot, the more use you get out of something, the more it costs, even with the same number of people. I think the also underlying instability here is that everybody is building tools on top of somebody else's model. And those somebody else's are not yet profitable on those models. So things will change. And that is brings in a certain amount of risk and also a certain amount of price pressure.
Yeah. And we haven't even talked about how those somebody else's also might destroy the planet. So, we the compute power needed to do what we want AI to do is non-trivial, and it just doesn't take a lot of research to realize that that could be a real concern. Hey, we're just have a few minutes left, and we didn't get to all the questions. Sorry, I didn't even get to all of my questions. This has been a great conversation. Last minute roundtable. Any final parting thoughts? And we'll go in reverse order. We'll go from our introductions. We'll go Megan, Nick, Marcus, and then JR.
So parting thoughts, right? All this is changing all the time, and we all might wake up tomorrow with a news break that changes everything, right? I think the important part is that we're having the conversations and opening up and inviting other people to the table to have those conversations. So I will also say, look around. Sorry, I'm going to take two. Look around the table when you're having that conversation and notice who is not here. Which worker population, which employee population, which community population is not here, and use your position at the table to help fill that gap for everybody's sake.
So AI is not going away, Megan?
Probably not. Maybe we'll wake up tomorrow and it might.
All right. Nick, any parting thoughts?
Thank you all for coming. I was going to mention a book that I'm right in the middle of reading, but Empire of AI, Dreams and Nightmares, and Sam Altman's Open AI. But fascinating book, just halfway through it. Highly recommend it if you want to understand what he went through and all the things that are happening. But
Can you drop that in the chat, Nick? That's
yes.
great. Awesome. Okay, Marcus.
Parting thoughts. This is a messy time, and the hard work that will give you the real benefits is messy. You mentioned, Vince, that the ROI calculation is difficult if you don't even know the cost. And sometimes, even if you know the cost, the ROI calculation is difficult, and we over-focus on that KPI rather than other benefits that we might be getting out of a tool. But everyone's just figuring it out. No one can give you the solution. If someone had the solution, they'd already be a multimillionaire with the book they'd written. You're gonna have to become comfortable with the messy bit. And this is more like a startup environment where we have to try things, we have to get people aligned, we have to fail a few times, we have to learn a few things, and we'll also succeed a few times. And that is just going to be the environment for the next few years to come. And that goes for what happens in organizations, that goes for how we implement things, and that goes for how do we work with vendors, and how can vendors help us in this process and help educate us. Because part of what vendors can do for us is they can help us understand the tool better and its strengths and weaknesses, and we can learn from that as well. That's something we can also improve going forward.
Thanks, Marcus. JR. Oh, we can't hear you.
I would say one of the biggest things with AI and the marketing and things that we've been talking about in L&D for the last year has been around things that make us or help us do the things that we already do, but do it faster. And that's fine. But I would challenge you to think about the things that AI can help you do that you can't already do. Find the things that you want to do that you haven't been able to do before and look for those use cases as opposed to just things like upload your PDF and make a course in 2 minutes. Big whoop. There's a lot of things that you can do that you've never been able to do before, and that's where the real value is.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Here's my parting thought. Everyone take a deep breath. It's the end of the year. Count your blessings. And if you feel overwhelmed by all the information, all the things that you could, or maybe you feel you should know, you're not going to be able to know it all. No one can know it all. So just take a deep breath, choose something that interests you within the world of generative AI, have it be value to you in your life, learn to use it, and then learn to share what you've learned. And I think if you do that consistently, we'll all be able to survive in this brand new world. So that's my parting thought. Hey, everyone. Thank you, Megan, Nick, Marcus, JR. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Thanks for your comments. Hope everyone has a great rest of the day and a great rest of the year. Signing
Thank
off.
you, Vince. Thanks for bringing us all together. This was great.
Thanks, everyone.
And thank you, Vince.